Little lavender stage for you all out there, too. Oh, well, welcome everybody to Wednesday Night Wisdom Share Sacred Practices. Thank you all for being here. I'm so grateful to be sharing tonight. One of my favorite topics, actually. A couple of my favorite topics, actually. And of course, every Wednesday night, we have a different facilitator. Next week, we have Gail Crosby coming again. And she's doing the Golden Gate, the Golden Thread, or Golden Gate, I think it's called. I'm not saying that right. I should have looked it up before I came, but she did a phenomenal job last month on helping us to kind of tap into that wellspring of inner insight and wisdom. And so she's doing like a part 2, but both parts stand on their own. So please come support Gail. She's coming all the way from Yucaipa to share with our community. So we appreciate everyone who shows up to support our facilitators for that, especially for her that's coming so far. And it's just a wonderful job that she does. She has a beautiful organization that she runs in Yucaipa, where she has basically conscious living garden. So, and it's really beautiful. She's having some kind of an event coming up soon. I'm sure she'll tell us next week that we could all go if we want to go out to her gardens. Yeah, that'd be fun. So, so of course every Sunday morning, come join us for our Sunday morning service celebration. I know Reverend News is speaking this next week coming up. And so come join us. Thank you also for all your love and support for our beautiful spiritual community. We really appreciate it. I'm always thrilled and amazed about how our spiritual community survives these challenging times that we've been going through. And it all is really because of our support and sharing of our time, talent, and treasure here at our spiritual community that has a ripple effect, out into the world. It's part of what we'll be talking about tonight. And so if you can and would like, we'd appreciate, you can share on our text to give. And that's, I think Jeff's going to put that up there. Yeah, he put that up there. And that's the phone number, and you just type the word, type in your dollar amount, and then after you type in the dollar amount, just type the word wisdom. And that'll go towards tonight's wisdom share. All right, so, gosh, any other things I could think of? Any other announcements anyone could think of? Any announcements? Am I missing anything? No, I don't think so. All right, so let's start. We'll start with a centering practice. And then we'll go into some neuroplasticity of the brain. We'll get kind of analytical, and then we'll drop into the bell of mindfulness tonight, which I'm excited to share. So let's start by just observing our body, and just noticing our body sitting here in this moment, breathing this breath. Breathing in, I'm aware that I'm breathing in. Breathing out, I'm aware that I'm breathing out. As we create some space now to quiet and still our mind, and align in this moment, this present moment, sitting here in this particular spot that we find ourselves sitting, in this exact moment right here, right now. As we carve out this little bit of time this evening together, we align in the sanctuary of peace, a ground within ourselves, a center, a place of refuge within. Just observing the rise and the fall of the breath. Is in this place that we tap into that inner wisdom, the wellspring of inner wisdom and knowing. And right now we create and co-create a sanctuary, a sacred space for ourselves and for each other in this collective sacred circle, wherever we find ourselves, knowing that we are all one in consciousness. And as we open up our minds and our hearts to receive now, to receive exactly what we came to hear, what our soul is yearning to know. Each one is here on purpose this evening, no matter where we are. Each one is creating and co-creating this sacred space together, supporting each other, uplifting each other this evening. And so with our minds and hearts and souls wide open, we're ready to receive. Our soul hears exactly what it needs to hear to support us on our path. And so for this we give thanks. We give thanks for this evening. And we throw the doors wide open to the infinite possibilities, letting Spirit have its way. We claim it as so by saying, and so it is. So, wanted to give a shout out to Jeff behind the scenes over there, running our social medias and sound and all that stuff, and our videos and all that. So thank you so much, Jeff, for all that you do on so many levels in so many ways around here. We really appreciate you. So Jeff Kingfisher, that is, yeah, in case you haven't heard. So I want to share about the bell of mindfulness, something that I really love and appreciate. And I don't always do it, but I love this practice. I heard it from Thich Nhat Hanh, from Plum Village. And it's a practice they do on their retreats. And it's a very simple practice, but it's very sacred. And I also want to talk about the neuroscience, the neuroplasticity of the brain. I work in a part of what I do in my life, or a big part of what I do, is working in addiction treatment centers. And when I first started in this field 10 years ago, it was actually 10 years ago last month, I've been doing this now. So I just celebrated 10 years doing this work that has really been my calling, everything coming together, So I'm so grateful to be sharing and doing the work I do. And when I first began, I wrote a curriculum called Spiritual Education in Recovery. And I was working with a guy who has a PhD, and he was relentless with me. When he says, "Mark, the stuff you're sharing has to be evidence-based, evidence-based. It has to be based in clinical studies, evidence-based." He kept saying it over and over. I'm like, for the love of God. This stuff has been going on for hundreds and thousands of years. This is nothing new. I didn't make this stuff up, mindfulness and meditation practices and all the stuff that I was teaching, science of mind and all this stuff, I don't know how evidence-based it was, and I'm like, okay, I'll see what I can do, But he wanted me to talk in this very clinical way. And he was right on some level, to work in the field that I work in now. It was much better received to speak to it from the perspective and angle of clinical. So the people with the Western minds who have the PhDs and all this stuff, that they would be able to relate and say, yeah, this stuff is really good, it does work. I had a hard time 10 years ago finding much that had to do with evidence-based when it comes to mindfulness or meditation, but I stumbled upon one study, and it was done by Dr. Sarah Laser, and she was a research neurologist from Harvard University. And it was a very well put together YouTube video, that I watched over and over and over again. And I learned a lot about the neuroscience, the neuroplasticity of the brain. And what they found in her studies was that the brain literally changes with meditation practices. There's certain parts of our brain that are affected. And it really, as I was listening to this, I was like, oh my God, this is like so perfect for the work that I'm doing in addiction treatment. I was grateful to hear that our brain can change and heal. Our brain can literally heal. Our brain is fascinating how it can heal and how it can create new neural pathways, And so one of the studies they did, one of the first studies they did in neuroscience and neuroplasticity of the brain, because they can measure the brain now with the MRI and the CAT scans and the PET scans and some other scans, There's all the scans that they do. They can measure our brain. They've mapped out our entire brain. They can tell all the parts of our brain and what parts of your brain operate different functions in your body. So it's pretty fascinating, the science and how they've done this all. And so one of the first studies they did was they took some group of people who never juggled before, and they measured their brain and with the MRI machine. And they taught them how to juggle, and they juggled for 90 days. And after 90 days, they measured their brain again. They had to practice, I think, for 20 or 30 minutes a day, right? So it was a kind of a regimented time where they had to practice this juggling. After 90 days, they measured their brain again with the MRI machine. They found that the gray matter that connects the connectivity between the eye-hand coordination, that the gray matter became thicker, that it grew like a muscle. So the connectivity of the neural sets developed, and that parts of the parts of the brain became thicker. And they said, oh, the brain can literally change. Now, Sarah Laser ran across some of these studies, and she said, I wonder if this can help with meditation. Now, what happened with Sarah Laser is she was a scientist. She didn't meditate. She was very clinical and very linear in her approach, and she shares about this. And one day, she was she was practicing for the Boston Marathon. And she had overtrained and kind of hurt one of her legs, a ligament or something in her leg. And the doctor told her that she probably can't run the Boston Marathon. She's going to have to do all this training and rehabilitation. But he said, if you take care of it, you might be able to do it. Well, she was walking down the street one day, and she ran across some yoga studio. And she saw this sign that said, hey, if you do this kind of practice, you'll be able to strengthen yourself and stretch and all this stuff. She's like, hey, this might be a way for me to get a little bit of exercise and get my cardio going and also help my knee, So while she was in this yoga class, the yoga teacher, who was not a neuroscientist, kept professing all these wonderful gifts and benefits of meditation, how it's going to change your brain, and how you can have better emotional regulation. And she's sharing all this stuff. And Sarah Laser's like, who does she think she is? I'm a neuroscientist, But after like 6 weeks of doing this, she started noticing that she was more peaceful, that she had a greater capacity to respond versus react. She noticed also something that the yoga teacher said, that you'll have more empathy and compassion. A certain part of our brain, there's a part of your brain that's responsible for empathy and compassion? Isn't that fascinating? And the yoga teacher was saying that, oh yeah, you're going to get this. So she started noticing the differences. Now she thought, well, maybe, just maybe she's giving me a suggestion, and maybe I'm just like thinking that this is happening, but it's not really happening. So what she did is she started doing some research, and she started finding some studies that started showing that meditation practices can be able to change the brain. And so there was some significant areas of the brain that changed in the prefrontal cortex and in the anterior cingulate cortex, right behind the prefrontal cortex. These parts of the brain that help us to focus our attention and problem solve and figure things out actually became thicker with consistent daily practice of meditation in some of the studies that she was finding. And she also found that the part of the brain, it's called the amygdala. Are you familiar with the amygdala? Anyone know what that part of the brain does? It's that fight or flight part of our brain, right? So if the tiger's chasing you, your body, you don't even have to even think about it. It's an instinctual part of your brain. It's way back here. It's also called the reptilian part of your brain. It's like at the very center of the brain. And they found that when the amygdala kicks in fight or flight, the whole flood of chemicals, all your blood goes to your extremities, your hands and your feet, and to fight actually give strength. They actually leave your organs to go to your extremities. The blood doesn't leave completely, of course, but a lot of the blood is being forced to your extremities so you could run faster or fight and be stronger in these areas. And so they found that when people are stressed out all the time, that the amygdala becomes enlarged. People who have PTSD have an enlarged amygdala. People who have stress, ongoing stress for a long period of time. Their amygdala could be, it's kind of, I don't know if I'm saying this technically what it's called, but it's like a long-term kind of trauma, like a daily, sometimes maybe we can relate it, maybe we had a bully at school when you were a kid, and every day, every year, you had to go to school and face this bully. You know, that could be caused like a long-term trauma where your amygdala becomes enlarged. If you have insanity in your household, this can cause stress. You know, work, many things that can cause this kind of stress, and it actually enlarges our amygdala. Well, here's the good news. They found that when one is in the actual practice of meditation, that while meditating, the amygdala becomes inactive while meditating, even more so than sleep. Did you ever have a dream, and you wake up from the dream and your heart's pounding? People who have a lot of stress and anxiety and an enlarged amygdala quite often don't sleep very sound because the amygdala is engaged, it's enlarged. They found also that when the amygdala is enlarged, it's responsible for a lot of our psychological disorders, including, like I said, PTSD. People have bipolar disorder, borderline personality, anxiety issues, anger, stress-related issues. They found that the amygdala is enlarged in these people. And so they found that when we actually meditate, that it actually calms all that down. So what happens is while we're actually in the practice of meditation, the whole whole brain calms down while you're awake, because you're focusing on one thing, right? You're in the present moment. You're in the here and the now, fully present in the moment, right? And in the here and the now, if we can start to maintain that, what happens, we start to develop that part of our prefrontal cortex of our brain that gives us the capacity to focus our attention on one thing. I don't know if anyone's experienced ADD, anybody? I had ADD really bad when I was a kid, and part of it was because I lived in a crazy household. Like, I didn't know what to expect when I came home. It was insane. And I had this ADD, and what they found is that when you have a consistent daily practice of meditation, that the anterior cingulate cortex and the posterior cingulate cortex. Now, the posterior cingulate cortex back here, this is responsible for what they call mind wandering. And mind wandering is our imagination. It's a good thing, right? We need this part. It's a wonderful part of our brain that our brain can imagine. Imagine the future, right? And remember the past, daydreaming, right? And anyone who has ADD knows that part's very active. We can easily go into the daydreaming, and distracted, What they found is when people have a consistent daily practice of meditation, that the anterior cingulate cortex and the posterior cingulate cortex start to work better together. They start to work efficiently together. This helps to heal the patterns of ADD and helps us to focus more. Now, that does not mean that the ADD goes away completely. This also doesn't mean that all of your anxieties are going to go away. And you'll be walking around some cloud nine, 24/7 of peace and harmony, and nothing's ever going to bother you. That's not what they're saying. But you'll learn how to deal with it in a bit. You'll be able to respond versus react to your own anxiety, to your own stress. In a way, like we teach in Science of Mind, you start to become more familiar with what's going on in your head around all that stuff, you see. And then with practice, we get to choose. At some point we realize, I can choose what I think about, what I pay attention to, and what I don't pay attention to so much. So this is the neuroscience, the neuroplasticity of the brain. So we can literally change our brain. Isn't that cool? So the benefits of meditation are tremendous, right? Help with stress reduction. It's very good for our body, right? Very good for our body. It's good for our mind. And it's really good for emotional regulation. Part of our brain, I think it's in the anterior cingulate cortex, is a part of the brain and is for emotional regulation. Now, emotional regulation is how we respond to our emotions, right? Now, if you're constantly in stress mode and adrenaline, and you're reacting, right, versus responding. So there's parts of our brain that are responsible for emotional regulation begin to calm. And we have a greater capacity to respond versus react to life and to challenges, to the world, and to our own emotions, you know. And what I've noticed with conscious practice and the science, the teachings of the science of mind and all this stuff that I've learned, is I've learned how to meet these emotional disturbances and mental disturbances that I have had and sometimes still do. You know, I've learned how to meet them, you know, and I meet them with compassion, self-compassion, self-love, self-understanding. And I respond versus react. So I believe, if you were to measure my brain, that that part of my brain is healed, you know, for the most part. You know, I still react, don't get me wrong, you know. But I can catch myself now, maybe you can too, you know, I can catch myself in the middle of a reaction now. And so I take a few mindfulness breaths, you know, right in the middle of the reaction, you know. So I love the neuroscience, if you can't tell. Yeah, I love teaching it. It's very simple, really. I have a number of videos that I use too along the way. I have this one video by a lady named Vicky Luby, and she has a phenomenal video of all the different parts of our brain and how it works with the mindfulness practices and meditation and how we can change our brain. So, does that bring up any questions or comments about the neuroplasticity of the brain? No? We have any neuroscientists here? No? Yeah. So you're saying someone told you that the gray matter doesn't go away? Yeah. Well, you know, there's probably some truth to that, but it gets weaker. So best example I can give is like when we learn how to ride a bike. You know, when you first learn how to ride the bike, you're probably not really good at it, right? But you, as you practice, and you have training wheels on for a while, and at some point you take the training wheels off, and next thing you know, you're riding the bike. Well, you developed in your mind, your brain, developed gray matter in the areas of your brain that are responsible for balance, coordination, all the things it takes to ride a bike. And once you've learned how to ride a bike, you don't have to think about it. You can just hop on the bike whenever you want, because your brain has developed that narrow set, right? Well, it's the same thing. Well, okay, so let's say you don't ride a bike for 10 years. So it might be a little rusty when you first jump on, but you probably can get it already because you already developed a narrow set. The narrow set's already been developed. So yeah, it doesn't go away. But when it comes to patterns of behavior, let's say, there's narrow sets and patterns of reacting, patterns of behavior, patterns of responding, patterns of responding to our own emotions, and of course the habits that we have, habits and patterns of drinking or using or whatever that was you were sharing about. You know, we have these patterns. We develop neural sets in our brain, so it's a good thing, bad thing, right, on some level, right? Like, yeah, we have these neural pathways, and that's why they say, for those of us who might be in a program of recovery, that, you know, once you kind of develop that, it doesn't mean it's going to go away. So that's why you want to, you know, you want to keep, you know, you don't want to keep, if you pick up and drink and use again, those neural sets are still there. But the good news is they get weaker. As the years go by, they get weaker. That communication between those parts of our brain, because they could be, you know, when you're in the middle of it, they're very rigid and very connected, right? But as you give it space, and especially if you meditate and stuff like that, when we're meditating, what happens is the whole neural set, everything calms down. And what I've noticed, it gives more plasticity. The word neuroplasticity itself means neuroplastic, meaning moldable, changeable, right? That's what the word means. When we meditate, you know, because we can have ridges in our brain, like they heard them called grooves, or, you know, habits. Like when this happens, this is the way we react. You know, and there might be a groove there, like a pattern, a habit. It's really connected and strong. But while we're actually in the practice of meditation, it calms down. the whole brain calms down, the neural sets calm down, and give space between the neural pathways. This is just my layman's way of talking about it. I'm not a neuroscientist, but it all calms down. And then when you come out of meditation, they come back, but they're not like, you're giving pliability. I think we're creating pliability in a way.
Maybe that's what she meant with that gray matter, was where all those habits are that need to be.
Yeah, they're not going to go away completely. Maybe you have a propensity, in certain areas to respond in certain ways, okay? But you can learn how to work with them. And then you can create new neural pathways. And then if you start creating new neural pathways and how you react or respond to certain challenges or triggers or whatever it is, then you create new neural pathways and those start to get weak. And these new ones get stronger, new ways of being. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. So, he's going to bring you the microphone. Oh, sorry.
Oh, I forgot we have to be, yeah.
I forgot too.
I usually have a big mouth, so it doesn't.
People on television.
It's hard for them to hear the,
So
Right,
meditation
okay.
give you peace.
You gotta hold it right by your mouth, yeah.
The meditation give you peace, and then you can see.
Oh, he's got to turn it on.
From far. And
Wait, start over, okay. Yeah.
Hello.
There you go, okay.
So meditation give you peace, and then you can see the anxiety that you used to have from far in peace, and you can choose, how to feel it or control it, or you're not that involved anymore.
So what's the question, I'm sorry?
No, the
Was there a question or-
meditation, it
or
helps, be in peace, so you don't feel that connected with the tension and the anxiety.
Oh,
and
yeah. You start getting more connected with the peace,
Right,
and then this reactionary part of us starts to lose its power,
right.
yeah.
You can
Yeah.
look from outside and you can react more
Yeah.
nicer.
Yeah, absolutely, can respond, right? Versus react, yeah,
Yes.
I love that.
Yes.
Yeah, we do develop that. I think, but it does take practice, and that's what they say, that's that consistent daily practice of meditation. A lot of these studies are about, where I got this evidence-based stuff, are 8-week studies, minimum, 8 weeks to 12-week studies, where people are meditating anywhere from 20 to 40 minutes a day, consistently every day. And with that, it's like a muscle, right? Our brain is like a muscle. So if I go to the gym, right, and I start working out, I might have to start with like little 10-pound weights, right? Maybe 10 or 20-pound weights. But then as I do it more and more, now let's say I go to the gym, I'm going to go at least once a month, right?
No.
How often would I go, right? A few times a week, hopefully, right? If I want to get anywhere with it, And so if I go just a few times a week, and I'm going consistently and regularly, what's going to happen? The muscles are going to become huge, right? And you might be able to increase the weight, right? It's the same thing with our brain, our mind. If we have consistent daily practices of meditation, we're developing the neural set pathways to help us to respond versus react. And it becomes more natural, you find. So, yeah. So we want to keep it consistent. So I want to share with you the bell of mindfulness. Now, something I've called this PMA, present moment awareness. PMA, present moment awareness. Now we spend an awful lot of time projecting into an imagined future. We spend an awful lot of time ruminating about the past, don't we? Have you noticed that? Anybody? Have you noticed that? Yeah. Busy, brilliant minds. We're so amazingly busy and brilliant, which is a good thing, isn't it? But sometimes we're spending so much time projecting into an imagined future and ruminating about the past, this can become a disturbance to our own self. It can become a disturbance. And sometimes, just like I was saying, we have these habits of thinking. We might quite often finding ourselves thinking about the future. So when we create the space to stop everything, like we're going to do here in a little bit, and to be here now in the present moment, we'll notice where our mind goes. You'll notice if your mind is thinking about the future or the past or some particular topic that keeps coming up. Quite often our mind will go towards things that we're really excited about or things we might be worried about. This is what happens. This is what the mind does. And the beautiful gift of being in the present moment, the practice of giving ourselves the job, of giving our brilliant mind the job of focusing on one thing, is that it helps to calm the mind. And at the same time, we can start noticing where the mind goes, when the mind starts going off on a train. You know, a pattern that it tends to go on, you know. You start to notice it. And then while being gentle, patient, and kind with ourselves, we bring our attention back to our point of focus over and over and over and over and over and over. Even if it's 10,000 times in 10 minutes, it's okay. Because some days the mind's like that, right? Sometimes it's really busy on something, because something's going on. So it's that returning our attention back to our point of focus, that this is what changes the brain. Because they were saying, like in the first study with the bike, with the riding the bike, is that repetition, doing that same thing over and over again until we learn that skill and develop the neural pathways, develop the neural set, right? Well, it's the same thing with meditation. You know, so the repetition within the practice of meditation is bringing your attention back to that point, single point of focus. You see? And so that bringing your attention back to the single point of focus is literally training your brain, changing the neural pathways in your brain. And then we're practicing not to follow thoughts too far. But then while being gentle, patient, and kind, we bring our attention back over and over again. And there's the repetition, and that's where everything in the mind starts to calm. The space between our thoughts begins to become wider. And then a very natural quieting of the mind begins to occur. It's not forced. It just begins to happen, you know. And that's our natural state, to be at peace, you know. In the Buddhist tradition, they say, you're coming home. I have arrived, I am home. You're coming home to yourself. You're coming home to the Buddha, Christ consciousness within yourself. You're coming home over and again. And we can begin to live from that place, you know, which I'm sure many of us already do here, who are listening and who are here. So, you know, in Thich Nhat Hanh, the Plum Village, they have periodically throughout the day they ring a bell. And when they hear the bell ring, everyone has to stop whatever they're doing. Everyone stops whatever they're doing for 1 minute. Whether you're in the kitchen cooking, whatever you're doing, you have to stop. And you bring your attention back to the present moment. And you take a few breaths. Breathing in, I'm aware I'm breathing in. Breathing out, I'm aware I'm breathing out. This begins to train the brain, you know. So I sometimes think of it as taking hold of the mind, taking hold of the brain, but not in a controlling way, but in really more of an allowing kind of way, you know. So let's do a little practice. Want to do a little practice? Does that bring up any questions or comments about all that I shared so far? No? Okay. So we'll do the bell of mindfulness. Let me just read just a little something from here. I thought was very wonderful. He says, the bell of mindfulness is the voice of the Buddha calling us back to ourselves. We have to respect such a sound, stop our thinking and talking, and get back in touch with ourselves, breathing and smiling. Breathing in, I'm aware that I'm breathing out. Breathing in, breathing out, I smile. Does that sound like a nice little practice? Breathing in, I'm aware I'm breathing in. Breathing out, I smile. And that's coming home to ourself, to our true self. So he says that when we do the bell of mindfulness, they actually have people called the bell masters. They're like a master of ringing the bell. It's a very intentional thing. And they ring the bell first time they ring it. They first get centered themselves. And they breathe in, and they get centered. And they ring the half, they call it the half ring, the half bell, where you go like this. And that wakes up the bell. Wakes up the consciousness, right? And then you ring it one more time. And the intention that the bell master says, body, speech, and mind in perfect oneness. I send my heart along with the sound of the bell. May the hearers, those who are hearing this, may the hearers awaken from forgetfulness and transcend all anxiety and sorrow. And they say that, before, as they're ringing the bell. They were sending that sound out, the bell of mindfulness. Okay. So let's begin just by observing our body. It's a very simple practice. Just noticing the rise and the fall of the body as we breathe. As we quiet and still our mind, we create some space right now to just be fully present in this exact moment right here, right now. We're doing this in an intentional way. Sitting up, we're not falling asleep or drifting off into la-la land. This is an intentional, focused practice. Creating a space to align and to come home to our true self. Body, speech, and mind in perfect oneness. I send my heart along with the sound of the bell. May the hearers awaken from forgetfulness and transcend all anxiety and sorrow. Breathing in, I'm aware that I'm breathing in. Breathing out, I smile. Breathing in. I'm aware that I'm breathing in. Breathing out. I smile. I have arrived. I am home. In the sanctuary of my own heart. The bell of mindfulness reminds me to come home to the Buddha within, the Christ consciousness within, the divine presence within. And it is from this place, as I quiet and still my mind and align with this ground of peace, a sanctuary within my own heart, a place of refuge within. A center of peace and wholeness that is always here. Body, speech, and mind in perfect oneness. I send my heart out along with the sound of the bell. May the hearers awaken from forgetfulness and transcend all anxiety and sorrow. Just allow the sound of the bell, the mindfulness bell, to be shared now with the world that so desperately needs it. We can send it to any areas that you may know of that are experiencing difficulty right now, whether it be in Haiti with the earthquake, Afghanistan with the issues and turmoils that are happening there, or perhaps in our own country, our own families, our own loved ones. We can imagine the sound rippling, this peace being shared with the world. I have arrived. I am home. Let's begin to take a few conscious breaths and begin to bring our attention back. What's really nice about that practice is that it doesn't have to be really, it's not complicated, is it? It's very simple, you know, very, and it doesn't have to be really, really long. It can be, you know, you can spend as much time as you want, you know, 10, 20, 30 minutes, 40 minutes, you know, whatever resonates for you, you know. I was talking with someone, I don't know if I wrote this, if I was talking to someone about this, but I was thinking about, you know, all this going on in the world today and the challenges that we're facing as human beings on this planet, you know. And he was like, what, you know, what's the best thing that we can do? You know, we can't fix it all, can we? You know, wouldn't it be nice if we could fix it all? But some stuff we can't fix, we don't know how to fix it. What are you going to do? So I think the best thing that we can do is what we just did. In present moment awareness, to bring our full attention, our full awareness to the moment, to this moment right here, right now. Breathing this breath and know that right now in this moment, right now, we're good, right? We're safe. I don't have to figure out the rest of all humanity, what's going to happen or not going to happen in the future. What I can do is I can be present in this moment and meet what's present from this more mindful way, from the capacity to respond versus react, you see. And then no matter what's going on out there, I can use the toolbox of tools that I have and be present in the moment to be in responsiveness, you know, to what's present versus reaction, forcing, controlling, right? So yeah. So what'd you notice? Anything you wanted to share about the bell of mindfulness? Anybody? No?
I just started crying. But maybe that's what I needed, you know, at that time.
You started crying, yeah.
Yeah, it's just that, you know how anxious you are, or how.
Do you have that microphone? Can you give her the microphone? Yeah. Yeah.
So it just, I mean, for me, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I was, you know, just following your guide, and I just started crying, and so I guess for me, maybe it was I needed that release, you know, so rather than, you know, distract myself and get something to wipe my face, I just kind of stayed with what you know, with your lead, and, you know, and then it just, I mean, it did stop, you know.
Yeah.
But I think sometimes you just don't even know how uptight you really are, or how much you're not breathing, or what's really, your body, your actual physical body is like, ah, so. Um,
Yeah, such a
but
relief,
being,
like a
yeah,
relief, right?
just being
Yeah.
able to let it go and not really even disrupt it by trying to get a tissue, or like you said, you've kind of taught me how to just, just stay in that moment, whatever it is, even if it's uncomfortable sometimes,
Yeah.
and ride that out, but with that
Listen
breathing.
to it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
be
the
with it.
breathing and the bell helped me, like, okay, but I'm
Yeah.
still here. I'm still safe. I'm still focused,
Nice.
So, I mean,
Yeah.
that kind of surprised me a little bit,
Yeah.
that I didn't let it distract me.
Nice.
I just kind of stayed with it, so.
Mhm. Beautiful. Yeah. So yeah, so the bell of mindfulness, you don't need me to do this, by the way. They have all these apps now on the phones. It makes your watch beeps or your phone beeps, You can set timers now, You can do it for yourself. You can set a timer on your phone. Or you could just be open to walk through your day, and every time you hear someone's phone ring, that someone's phone ringing is a mindfulness bell. Could be a car horn. Maybe pick something where you can, more and more than you're picking more maybe than one thing that reminds you to come back. And just like Thich Nhat Hanh does in Plum Village, you can, when you hear the mindfulness, whether it's a car horn going off or the chime on your phone, you stop and take a few breaths. I have arrived, I am home. Breathing in, I'm aware I'm breathing in. Breathing out, I smile. Now if I do that every time I hear the sound, the sound of the bell, the mindfulness bell. And of course it's very nice to do it in Sangha, in spiritual community like we just did. So precious and powerful to do it the way we just did it. But you can, begin to weave it throughout your day in these other ways, He even went so far to share, Thich Nhat Hanh was sharing, you could even have a mindfulness bell without a sound. So maybe you're driving, you pick one thing, so every time you see a stop sign, it reminds you to stop and take a breath. Yeah. So in many ways to practice this stuff. Yeah.
I do have a question.
Sure.
So, I know for me, quieting the mind before I go to sleep has been important.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've used sound baths and bells on YouTube or apps to quiet the mind and go to sleep. And I've been doing that for quite a long time, and it's been very, very helpful. But now I find it hard to meditate to some of these sounds because I want to sleep.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Stay
Yeah.
awake because for me it's been,
That's awesome.
It's helped you to sleep. Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know what to do. Maybe do both. Be awake in practice is also.
Yeah. So
Change the sound.
that's a really good insight. Yeah. Yeah.
Can I have you share that again real quick? I'm sorry.
Oh, he was sharing. Yeah. Okay. Good. Yeah. You were sharing that you have difficulty with the meditation. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
have used the actual sounds and Tibetan bowls on YouTube apps to sort of go to sleep at night to quiet the mind, and now I find it sometimes difficult to stay awake when I do meditation.
Yeah.
through
Right away.
sounds.
Yeah.
So I just am looking for some guidance on how to.
Yeah. Well, I would say the best thing you could do is first recognize what you're saying. You're recognizing that that's what happens. So there is a neural set in your brain developed that kicks into dopamine and everything else. And as soon as you start hearing this stuff, you start falling asleep because now your brain's developed that, right? So how do you change that? Well, I would say the best thing to do would be to be very intentional with your practice. When you're doing just a meditation practice where you're not falling asleep. And so one of the best things we could do is watch our posture. So if I sit up and I'm sitting in a posture, leaning away from the back of the chair. It's hard sometimes in these chairs because they're so cushiony. But if you could sit up and imagine each vertebrae stacked upon the next, right? And if I sit like this, if I start to fall asleep, what's going to happen? I'm going to wake myself up, right? Because I'm falling over at some point, But so when I'm watching my posture, it's giving me another layer of focus. So not only am I focusing on my breath, I'm now focusing on my posture. I might sit in a mudra with my hands in a particular position, right? I may I might not close my eyes. Maybe find a candlelight or the bowl, something to look at with your eyes so they're not closed, until you, yeah. That could be helpful, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. All right, well, anybody else have any questions, comments? No? Good. Well, thank you all for coming tonight. What a wonderful Sangha. Yeah.
Quick question.
Oh, yeah.
Next sound bath is a week from Friday?
My next sound bath? Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not this Friday, but next Friday. Yeah.
Do you need reservations for that, or just show up?
We don't have the reservation set up, but so I think we'll be okay. We're going to do social distancing. We're going to everyone's going to wear masks until we're settled, and we'll keep social distance and put everything against the walls. And yeah, I think we'll be okay. Yeah. But it's the last Friday. Thank you for bringing that. It's the last Friday this month. And I'm excited about it. We're going to be doing a really cool guided meditation. Part of what I was talking about tonight, about creating that PMA, present moment awareness, and yeah, giving that to the world. All right. Sound good, everybody? Thank you all for being here. Namaste. Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you. Thanks. All right, so we'll see you next week. Come next week to see Gail, if you can. Gail Crosby. I'm so excited she's here. She's so amazing. What an amazing speaker. She has such a wellspring of insight and wisdom she brings. So do y'all feel like neuroscientists now after that? Yeah.